Well, welcome back to First Edition. Good to have you with us this morning. Well, joining me now is Liberal Senator James Paterson. Senator, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Before I get to your thoughts on an Australia-UK free trade deal, I just want to get your opinion on what's going on with China again. They're accusing Australia of dumping our wine on them at a cheaper price than their own product. How are you reading into that?
Peter, it's a frankly inexplicable decision by the Chinese government to single out Australian wine, which is the second most expensive imported wine in China, for an anti-dumping investigation. Anti-dumping is when a government subsidises a product to be exported at below market rates to another market, presumably to displace a domestic supplier or other competitors. The Australian government is doing the opposite of that. Australian wine industry is doing the opposite of that. It's a premium product sold into China. So unfortunately, we don't think there's any basis to this anti-dumping claim, and the Chinese government has provided no evidence to support it.
We spoke to one of the wine industry representatives on our show a little bit earlier, and he seemed to suggest that perhaps the Australian wine producers were a victim of our own success, given the free trade deal between China and Australia, which was helped to kind of prioritise Australian wine over French wine, and that has worked out to be the case. So in that sense, perhaps we are a victim of our own success in this front, and China may have a reason to do what they're doing.
Well, about 37% of all the foreign wine sold in China is Australian wine. It's 10% ahead of our next closest competitor, which is French wine at 27%. So certainly it's been a stunning success for the industry. And it's a success that's been driven by the preferences of Chinese consumers who value Australia's high quality products. And if the Chinese government wants to interfere in that and restrict the choices of their own consumers, then that's a very disappointing thing.
Do you believe this is about anti-dumping, or do you think this is about a trade war?
Well, there's certainly no evidence that the Australian government is dumping wine or assisting the industry to dump wine. So you have to think that there are other things at play here, other motivations at play. And that's unfortunate. We saw during the dispute over barley that, again, no evidence at all was provided by the Chinese government that there was dumping. So any fair-minded independent observer would be hard-pressed to conclude it's not some other form of economic coercion.
Well, now there's fears that this could lead to milk products and powdered milk. That might be next on the hit list. Is that what you're expecting?
Well, I hope that's not the case. Certainly there's no reports to confirm that yet, Peter. And that would be yet another disappointing decision if that were to happen. Australian dairy producers don't dump either, nor do our iron ore producers, nor do our gas producers, nor do our coal producers. All of them just supply China at a competitive market rate. And it's Chinese businesses and consumers who choose Australian products because they're high quality, because they're affordable, because we deliver reliably.
Is this another reason of why we need to look at other trading relationships, such as the UK and free trade, which is what you've written about today?
Well, when we live in an uncertain world, Peter, our traditional friends and allies are ones that we know we can depend on. And I think it's really exciting now that the United Kingdom has left the European Union that they can secure a free trade agreement with Australia. And our challenge is to make the most of that opportunity. In the first instance, clearly the United Kingdom wants a quick deal, and we should help them in that by reducing trade barriers as much as possible and liberalising movement of people between our countries, maybe with a visa similar to the one of the E3 visa that we negotiated in our US free trade agreement in the early 2000s. But over time, I'd like to see that built upon. I'd like to see it much more closely resemble the free trade and free movement of people that we have with the New Zealand government, which is World Trade Organisation says it's one of the best free trade agreements in the world. And ultimately, I think it would be natural to form an economic bloc with countries, like-minded countries like Canada, New Zealand, UK and Australia, which is sometimes called the CANZUK agreement, which would have unimpeded trade and unrestricted movement of people, save for appropriate security and health carve-outs like we have in the New Zealand arrangement.
Well, you've got the vaccine announcement from the government today. Is this an example where free trade can be worked in?
There's increasing degrees of cooperation between like-minded countries in this uncertain world. Josh Frydenberg has led an initiative of the treasurers of the Five Eyes nations, which is the Security Alliance, including those 4 countries plus the United States, for regular economic discussions and coordination. Free trade, free movement, alliances on vaccines and scientific advancements are all a natural thing to do with countries with whom we share a common language, common values, common legal and political institutions, and in the case of 4 of those countries, a common head of state as well.
Senator, you chaired a COVID committee yesterday, and you had the head of the defence response into COVID, particularly when it comes to Melbourne. He maintains, just like the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister maintained, that ADF help was offered. This flies in the face of what the Victorian Premier is saying. What were you thinking at the time when you heard from what the defence of the response was saying to you?
Well, in some ways, Peter, I feel very sorry for the ADF because there's nothing less comfortable for them than being involved in any way tangentially to some kind of political dispute. So all that they can do, and all that Lieutenant General John Fruin did yesterday before the committee, is get the bare, simple facts out there about what happened, when it happened, and how it happened. And he made it very clear that the ADF did offer to Victoria support for the hotel quarantine system, as it did for every other state and territory. And indeed, New South Wales and Queensland took them up on that offer. And he made it clear that what they're providing in New South Wales is much broader than what Daniel Andrews was describing. It's not just ferrying passengers to and from the airport, but it also includes providing security and concierge services in hotel quarantines itself in New South Wales. So I think Daniel Andrews has been exposed here, having misled the Victorian Parliament and the Victorian people. And I think he needs to urgently clarify, because it's not a tenable situation to have his evidence out there contradicted by a completely impartial, independent ADF official.
But can the ADF actually provide security? Because they don't have the power to arrest people that the police do.
Not in a legal sense, but they assist the police in doing so. And what John Fruin told the committee happens in New South Wales in hotel quarantine is they provide monitoring of behaviour in hotel quarantine. And if someone was trying to leave hotel quarantine inappropriately or early, they alert the New South Wales police. So they assist in that essentially by being the eyes and the ears. And I think that would be a very appropriate role for them to play in Victoria as well, if and when we start hotel quarantine again.
All right, Liberal Senator James Paterson, as always, appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for joining us. Well, coming up, US President Donald Trump launches a